Well, good evening, everyone. We are starting a new Wednesday night Bible series in the book of Genesis. So, it's going to take us a little while to get through this. Genesis is a big book, but man, there's a lot to cover. And during this, I'm going to drop stuff in. As an example, tonight, after the introduction, we'll look at chapter 1 and talks about the creation of the world. And in 7 days. Well, you know, there's a lot of people today, there's even people that call themselves Christians today, they say, well, it took more than 7 days. Well, really? So is the Bible false? What most people don't realize, the biggest problem with most people that are interested in theology or Christianity or are Christians is they know diddly and or squat about apologetics. And that's the defense of the Bible. There's a couple of videos I'm going to use throughout this series. One of them next week I will be using that shows the complete opposite of what science teaches about the creation of the earth. Oh, it took millions and millions of years. But they don't want to talk about Surtsey Island, which was formed in 1963, and we got video of it, and they test it and all that stuff, and everything says it's hundreds of thousands of years old. But we have actual video proof that it's not. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about all these layers. They have models, they've run all this stuff that shows fast sedimentation and so forth. So I'm going to be inserting stuff. When we talk about the flood, I've got some videos about the flood and so forth. So we're going to be covering, it's not just this chapter, this chapter, this chapter, this chapter, it's this chapter, this chapter. Oh, here's a good point. Let's look at this and fill in some additional information. Because when you come in contact with someone outside of this building, outside of this church, maybe even in another church or maybe even this building, they go, well, you know, it says it's 7 days. I don't think so. They didn't define the day. Well, they didn't read Genesis if they didn't define what a day was, because God defined what a day was in Genesis chapter 1. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Then they, oh, well, you know, it could have been millions of years. Okay, he was thinking was 1 day. That's why we have to, there's a great statement, there's a video on it from A.P. West. True science is a Christian's best friend. And that's very true. So throughout this, I'm going to try to inject some different known historical facts that can be proven today that parallel what the Bible teaches and says. And there's, quite frankly, a lot of false teaching out there. The other day, there was I was reading one that supposedly they have these tablets that are Chinese that go back over 35,000 years, and they don't say anything about a world flood. But yet, the truth is, that's just a made-up meme on the internet. First of all, they do have some old ones, but not that old. And second of all, they actually do mention a flood. So you have to be very careful about a lot of false information out there. But Genesis, let's jump into a little bit of backstory on Genesis. I generally start a new book always talking about authorship, dating, all that sort of stuff, some outlines. So we're going to cover that here and now fairly fast because it's not too much to that. Authorship is Moses. Pointed to Moses. Now, there's documentary hypothesis. I wrote a matter of fact, if any of y'all would like to get some good reading to go to sleep, I've got a 10-page paper I wrote on it about the doc hype, talking about all the different stuff that points to the fact that Moses wrote the Pentateuch, which are the first 5 books of the Bible. Of course, he wrote that in the 15th to 13th century BC. while they were in Exodus, while they were wandering the desert, excuse me. The first two chapters kind of cover the creation, really, as much as anything. Chapter 1 is the 6 days of creation. Chapter 2 is a little bit more detailed look at creation of man. You know, how he goes in and talks about Adam and Eve a little bit more, in a little bit more detail. And as far as the book Genesis, as we call it, that's not what the Jews call it. It's not what it's called in the Torah either. Genesis is actually a Greek word that was put to it. The Greek word means beginnings or origin. That's what the Greek word Genesis means. Now, if you look at a scroll Torah, that doesn't have, I'm talking about the Old Testament, Jewish, it'll have the word Berset or Bersit as the name of the first book. And that literally translates to the first 3 words, in the beginning. So Genesis being origin or beginning, it's just a Greek word for in the beginning. Let's see here. There is some structural framework around this, and I'll try to point them out to you as we hit them. Now, we got 50 chapters, so it's going to be a few weeks before we're done, obviously. But it's kind of broken down into different timelines. And the recurring literary device is known as Toledot formula, which means the Hebrew word Toledot literally translates to generations. The generations of Abraham, generations of Adam, the generations of Jacob, so forth. It can also be translated the history of Adam, the history of Moses, the history of, and they've kind of got it broken down into different groups in that way. And 10 times in the book, the words, these are the generations of, are said. These are the generations of Adam. These are the generations of Moses, so forth. So that's kind of a break. They kind of break it down after the first few books like that. Now, the first 11 chapters are kind of primeval history. It's more of like on a global scale, cosmic scale, if you will. It's pretty symbolic. Universal human questions that answers, like the origin. How did all this come about? Talks about the problem of evil, language, culture, so forth. And then chapters 12 through 50 focuses more on the patriarchal history. That's where we get into the Adams and the so forth, and the Abrahams and everything. But it also brings up things of the time that we can look back on now, about legal contracts, customs, travel routes, domestic struggles, and different things in that time period. The book itself is highly reflective of ancient Near East culture. A lot of what they were doing then, find here in Genesis, was the culture of the time. Many of the social customs, the surrogacy laws, adoption practices, treaties, oaths, rituals, actually align perfectly with architectural discoveries that have been made of early Mesopotamian law. Specifically, Mesopotamian law codes as the Nuzi codes, or Nuzi tablets, and the codes of Hammurabi code that has been found on tablets from the Mesopotamia area culture of this time. So all of these things lines up. Now, of course, the book itself is travels, if you will. It's in Mesopotamia, the Eden, Ur, and Babel area. Then it moves into Canaan, the Promised Land, and concludes in Egypt. Now, it's, of course, really the launch pad, if you will, for the whole canon, which is the whole inspired Word of God, Old and New Testament. And it, you can trace a lot of things back to there. Think about how often the New Testament and the Old Testament go back and talk about things that happen in the book of Genesis. So, that's a quick introduction. I'll kind of sprinkle some of that stuff through as we're going through it, and I'll kind of give a reminder at the beginning of each week. But let's look at Genesis chapter 1. There's actually more stuff in it than we can make out of it than a lot of people don't realize when they just read it at a high level. It starts out, chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning. As we were talking about a minute ago, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So now we have God and the Spirit of God. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So He just set what a day was. Combination of day and night. Verse 6. Verse 6, and God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters He called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seeds in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to its kind, and the trees bearing fruit with seeds in it according to their kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. How many of y'all keyed into something there? I want to read verse 12 again. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seeds in it according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. Then it goes on to say, and there was evening and there was morning, the third day. Okay? How many of y'all have ever seen a one-day-old plant? Ain't a one of you ever seen a one-day-old plant. Adam saw a couple of day-old plant. God created an earth that human beings could live on and survive on. If you have a tree that's producing fruit already, it is not a seed. It is. Did He produce a tree that had one growth ring? I'd love to see that thing flopping all over the place. It couldn't even probably hold up fruit. It would have no stability. God created everything we needed to inhabit this earth during this section of Genesis chapter 1. And just said in one day, he produced plants and vegetation that were already producing fruits and vegetables. Now, I ask you, one day old earth, what does that look like? Well, on day one, it looked like this world we're living in. But here's the problem. God created, first of all, if a tree had to grow in the ground on day one, what had to be in the ground for it to grow? Everything it needed to grow. Other words, what does it need now? There's layers there of different things that hold different, well, I would say fertilizer, but different minerals and so forth that they need. Now we go, oh, see, that's created by a tree that's died, and that tree had to grow up and fall over and rot in place, and then that had to be covered by millions of years of dirt, and now a tree can grow. No. What was the earth? Was it nothing but a solid rock when God created it? Oh, wait a minute. Was it nothing but sand when God created it? No. God created an habitable world. I can't speak. See, I got going. I lost my vocabulary there. He created a world that we could live in. He couldn't create all these things and then wait for all these millions of years to them to be. Why would he do that? He's smarter than that. I can't help it if some people aren't smart enough to realize that. I'm not trying to be too blunt, but let's be honest. God created the world, created it for man, put man in it. If he put man in a world that man couldn't survive in, he's not God. If he's not smart enough to know to create a world that we can inhabit. That world, when we look at the stuff of that world, we go, oh, it takes millions of years to do that. Unless God created it like that on day one. Consider that. If the world was only one day old, what did it look like? It certainly wasn't inhabitable if you say it takes all these millions of years and billions of years. You know, it's funny. Think about how many times they have changed the age of the earth. They have changed science, quote unquote. Atheists, quote unquote, every time you turn around, they're changing the time. Because every time they realize, oh, well, you know, we said it was this old. Well, oh, well, it can't be that old because of this. All right, well, we got to change how old it is. We've been told how old it is. If I take, I don't know if y'all ever heard, if any of y'all watch Antiques Roadshow, there's a famous bit on Antiques Roadshow. There was a chair from the 1600s. Praised all of this, you know, they were blown away. They did all of this stuff to it. That chair's from the 1600s. A guy made it in the 1930s. And he showed them how they did it. He even took the chair and put it in the surf, let it bounce around on the rocks. All this different stuff he did to make it fool the people. People fool themselves today trying to think that God did not make it old to begin with. He had to make it old so we could live in it. He had to make trees that were already mature. He already had to make everything in the ground that a tree needed for stability. Oh, don't forget minerals to produce all of those things right there in verse 12. All right, let's move on to 14 if we're going to get done here in 9 minutes. And God said, let there be light in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. Let them light, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars, and God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly around the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing in which the waters teems, and that moves about in it, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, let us make mankind in our image, plurality there, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I will give you seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, they will be yours for food. And all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Chapter 2. This kind of bleeds into first couple verses of chapter 2. It says, thus the heavens and the earth were completed in their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that, from all the creating that he had done. Okay. Just a couple of things I want to point out, then I'm going to cover something else. This kind of setting the stage for the entire arc of Scripture, if you will. We've got creation coming up. We're going to have fall. Then we're going to have redemption. Then we're going to have restoration through the whole Gospels. When I say the whole Gospel, I'm not talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The whole thing of God's Word. But it shows what the whole world was intended to be. Perfect, harmonious, whole, perfect relationship with God, making all things new. Think about it now. Man, when you think about that, and then we get to the fall in Genesis 3, it really highlights the beauty of God's redemptive work through Jesus Christ. Boy, we fell a long way. And God will restore us all. And he has made plans to do that in a manner to do that. There was quite a few of the commentators talked about a holy pause. Even though God doesn't experience physical exhaustion, he still rested on the seventh day, blessing it and making it holy. It kind of is an example of rhythm of life, some people claim, which I can see how they could say that. There's a balance of meaningful work and labor, and we should have intentional rest as well to go along with that. What happens when you work 7 days? Amy is work like last 21 days straight, and is still working. That's bad for a human being. We need rest. We're not solely defined by our productivity. Okay, I'm skipping a couple of things I have here. It does say God commands humanity to subdue the earth and rule over creation. Now, that's not necessarily a license to exploit, but a call to stewardship. Now, remember, this was in a perfect world back then. We were meant to be God's representatives, taking care of stuff. I want to read something here, and I want you to stop and think about this. And to all the beasts, this is verse 30, and to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground. Look at those first four words. And to the beasts. This is who God is talking to. And basically all the birds and everything on the ground and so forth. Everything that has the breath of life in it. What does it say? I give every green plant for food. There is no evidence. There is evidence that animals did not consume one another before the fall of man. But there is no evidence to say they did before the fall of man. Matter of fact, Adam and Eve are told they can eat all of the plants except for the tree of life. They're not told they can go over there and shoot that squirrel if they were in East Tennessee and barbecue it. That's not what they were told. That's not the way the world was ordered then. I remember back, now this is a false statement, but I remember when Karen and I were living in Atlanta, this was 28 years ago, driving up 75. We went into downtown every day to work and then came back. There was a billboard, and it says, Jesus Christ was a vegetarian. Well, that's not true. But they were trying to all they were concerned about was, they don't want people eating meat. So they were trying to lie and say, well, you know what? Adam and Eve were vegetarians for a while. So were all the animals on the earth vegetarians for a while. Genesis 9. So when did that change, Tim? Genesis 9. Genesis 9, verse 1. Then God blessed Noah and his sons after the flood, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in the number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you, this is important, the fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth. What does that mean? Well, they weren't scared of them before. Think about it. Why would the fear and dread have to fall on the beasts of man if they were already afraid of them? It says, the fear and dread of you will fall on the beasts of the earth and all the birds in the sky and on every creature that moves along the ground and on the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. Did y'all realize that was the order of what they were supposed to eat? They weren't grilling steaks in the Garden of Eden, nor were they in Babel, nor were they in other places. They weren't approved to do that till right here in Genesis 9. Interesting. Well, that's it for tonight. Tomorrow, next Wednesday, we've got, I don't know how much video we will have, because some of them are about the creation of the earth and how all this, look at all the layers there in the Grand Canyon. Those took millions and millions and millions of years. Well, then they show how it's created quickly, especially in a flood. And then it goes on to talk about the flood as well. I'm not going to cover the flood part next week. I'm going to cover that part when we cover the flood in Genesis. Makes sense.
You mentioned the stages way out earlier. God created the plants mature. He also sounds like He created Adam and Eve as mature.
Oh, yeah. Dale made the comment where I was talking about God creating the plants mature. Well, guess what? Adam and Eve wasn't an infant either. Yeah. And all the baby animals weren't, they may have been a day old, but they were fully mature as an animal, just as Adam and Eve were. First of all, if they weren't, how was an infant going to live without someone? How was a baby whatever going to live without something or someone? Wasn't. Have you ever seen a bird just hatch from a nest? Oh man, I can still see that. I don't know. A month and a half ago, we were up at the property. We have these cabins, and up in the rafters there was a bird's nest. And I was moving some cabling. Boop goes the bird's nest, lands on the porch. And I was like, I hope there's nothing in that. Well, actually what I said was, I hope there were no eggs in that. Got over there and there weren't any eggs in it. There's some little bitty baby birds about like this. They died. You know? I mean, 2 or 3 of them were dead from falling that and hitting the ground. I hate to say it, I felt bad, but that's the vulnerability of an extremely, of a newborn, if you will. And Dale made a good point. He made mature plants, but he also made mature humans when he made them. Something else to consider. Sadly, there's a lot of people that don't go down any of these avenues, don't ask enough questions when they're trying to figure out the age of things. They stop. They stop when they get the answer they think they want. You've got to go down the rabbit holes. You got to figure things out if you want. I mean, you can just believe that it was done this way, but there's actually proof out there that it was done this way. And there's a lot of false proof saying it wasn't. And that's what some of the videos are about, showing some of the people that are smarter than I am, talking a lot of science and showing a lot of things and describing it in a manner we can understand. That's part of the reason I want to cover the videos as we go out through different things throughout this whole Genesis series, to fill in that information when you have discussions with people outside of your church friends, or maybe even with your church friends. It's hard to tell. But we're going to go ahead. We've already run about 6 minutes over, but we'll go ahead and shut it down for now. We hope you can join us next Wednesday night at 6:15 for part number 2. And we'll see y'all then. Take care. Bye-bye.